Well, it's January the 27th, Wednesday, and see where we are right now. Of course, I guess the big event from yesterday was the beginning of the President Trump's post-office impeachment trial, and I think we already see the lay of the land there with the motion from Rand Paul, which was, of course, defeated by a vote of 55 to 45, with 5 Republicans joining the group. And for the most part, it's mostly the usual suspects, I think: Romney, Collins, Murkowski. Toomey is kind of a new one, but he announced he's not running for office for re-election, so I guess he doesn't need the support of the base. And of course, Sass, which is kind of interesting because Sass is more of a younger senator who's been known to be anti-Trump, kind of like the Jeff Flake of Nebraska. But the question on him is basically, does he really want to have a future politically? I mean, this doesn't sound like a good move. Of course, we'll have to see how he actually votes on the actual conviction vote itself. But it gives you a thing that if 45 Republicans believe that the whole process is illegitimate to begin with, it doesn't seem likely they're going to convict. And note also that Mitch McConnell was one of the no votes. Excuse me, one of the yes votes, let me say. That is to say, Mitch McConnell was voted against having the impeachment trial. And that's why I predicted all along. What McConnell's doing this, McConnell's doing that, and I'm saying no, he's not. He's playing a game with the Democrats. It's all about maneuvering and herding the cats on his own party and dealing with Schumer on the other side. Okay. So if you like these videos, remember to subscribe if you're on YouTube, or if you haven't got a YouTube account, I think you can set one up easily, and you can click the bell to get notified if you need that. Because that would help. And forward them to people else that you might think are interested in. You can just copy the link, and email it to people so that other people can see them. Try to get as much support as we can. Okay, let's get on with it here. So I think we kind of see where that's going, and of course, it was pushed off to the 8th of January the 9th, excuse me, it'll be a Tuesday, when the actual trial begins. And I think even looking at Senator Paul's speech, I don't know if this is going to be such a great thing for the Democrats. First of all, it will fail to achieve the goal of conviction. It doesn't seem to have shaken out any really more rhino Republicans than we already knew about for the most part. And it looks like it's going to give some people on our side a chance to have some real polemics against the Democrats, pointing out that a lot of Democrats are just as guilty of things as Trump allegedly is. And in fact, we have a very good case, of course, that Trump is literally innocent of what he's being charged with, which I've kind of hit that before, but real briefly. There was no sedition. No insurrection or whatever. There was no attempt to actually overthrow the government here. There was an unarmed group of rioters there were people in the group that probably had negative, destructive intentions, maybe even murderous ones towards certain members of Congress. But that's hardly an organized plan to. At any rate, it wasn't backed or known of by Trump. Two, it turned into just basically a riot, and so I think. But the second point again is that Trump didn't inspire it in any way. We now know from all the court documents that are coming out that in fact it was pre-planned ahead of time, and not on Parler, but primarily on Facebook user groups. So this is kind of one of those false things. And I think the third thing I would point out is very possible that since it's known that the security folks really knew about this, did they let this happen deliberately in order to give Trump a black eye on the way out of office? I think that's a serious possibility. In other words, they could have stopped it. Did they even warn Trump it was a possibility? Just a point. And this all may come out, some of this may come out in the impeachment trial too, on the defense. We haven't heard much from President Trump since he left office, so we really don't know what these people are going to say, and that'll be notable. And on the other issue, I guess since we seem to have a resolution for the moment on the organization of the Senate, I think we'll see how that plays out. It's been a big theme I've been playing on. It looks like for the moment things are what we might say in the scientific world quasi-stable, meaning it isn't going to happen today or tomorrow. That is the big end of the filibuster and all the really bad stuff. But it's not impossible. It depends on what the input signal is going to determine what the output result will be, I think. And that's why I caution Republicans to tread a little carefully for the moment, particularly until Biden's popularity sinks a little bit more. We're still kind of waiting to get enough data on his popularity level. Rasmussen's doing a poll, and I saw something like 48% popularity for Biden at this point, which is in the ballpark of where Trump was most of the time. So it looks like he hasn't really won many people over yet on unity. But I don't know. That's so preliminary. I haven't really even seen today's numbers yet, so I don't know yet on that. But I do think that the wave of actions that he's taken have totally shattered the image that he was trying to present of being a moderate figure. This is really radical left-wing stuff, what he's doing right now, all across the board. I mean, this whole racial equity thing, which seems to be aiming toward equality of results, not equality of opportunity, is kind of another crazy idea from the left, and the idea that there's some big problem of people discriminating against Asians and Pacific Islanders. I mean, I've never heard of any organized groups that were prejudiced against primary hostility was against Asians or Pacific Islanders. I mean, this is so silly. I mean, there are hate groups out there, but that's generally not the general group that is being the victim. But that's apparently one of the things that's in their idea. It probably is going to be more of an aggressive affirmative action program, I assume, mainly. So, which of course, I'm digressing a bit here, but another thing, they keep talking about this whole structural racism thing, and I'm asking myself, what structure of racism is there, and why don't we just disband it? I mean, I don't know any organized racial structure within our society at all. That would imply that people would be deliberately judged based on their race, and presumably, if you're not white, somehow that gets you a negative mark. From everything I know, every structural racial policy is the other way around. It's designed to give a leg up to all other groups. So, I mean, it seems like it's a bogus issue put out by a very deceptive political movement. So that's kind of where we are on that one. We'll see what continues. Is ongoing attack on our energy industry is full scale, and that's kind of really a bad thing in the long run. In the short run, it probably will have a minimal impact on the energy supplies because these take time to develop, but it will have an immediate impact on people's jobs in a lot of areas, and that's going to hurt. And I think the unions that backed Biden that thought that he was on their side maybe found out that he's really not on their side. Another big thing that happened, though, and I think I want to get into this, is that, of course, the court decision in the district court in Texas putting a 2-week hold on the on Biden's open borders policy, which was reminiscent of what happened to some of Trump's early executive orders. And since that will also fall within the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, that may have some legs. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But I think that essentially the whole idea here is that similar to what they did to Trump, that he didn't follow any normal procedures. Plus, apparently there were some U.S. government agreements with Texas on how changes in the policy would be carried out, and so that might. This could very well end up in a Supreme Court case, I guess, because obviously the Biden Justice Department will pursue it as far as it needs to be pursued. And I don't necessarily think it'll ultimately do it, but since it's a 100-day plan, theoretically, if you can delay it 100 days, you've achieved your goal of kind of nixing this 100-day plan. And obviously, the idea is also to try to get the thing pushed as far into the summer as possible, because obviously that's not the best time to start walking through those areas. So that's kind of, we'll see how that goes forward. I would like to see, again, I mentioned before that the Keystone XL pipeline companies and the unions associated with losing their jobs should both independently file lawsuits there. I think, again, what sort of decision process was put in place to justify that. I mean, just going in the first day and making all these rash decisions against things that have been adjudicated intensely for years seems to me to be not following the appropriate procedures, just like President Trump ran into, and it seems like these are really open for lawsuits. From the company's point of view, another lawsuit might just be able to sue them to get their money back. I mean, if they're told by the government they have the right to do something, and then for no particular reason arbitrarily are told now you don't, and they've spent a lot of money on it, don't they deserve compensation for that? It seems to me like that's kind of almost similar to a breach of contract concept. And of course, the other issue, which I highly encourage, would be anybody that has the resources, funds, and cause to do it, to file lawsuits against big tech for all their censorship, for those that have been censored. And my thinking is that Section 230 might be slowly but surely done in the court system, the same way that things like Roe v. Wade was passed. I mean, in truth, there was nothing in the Constitution really about the abortion issue at all. The Constitution, as a textual document, is completely neutral on it. The court found clever legal arguments to justify what they did back in the 1970s. So that's true, but I think it's time for our people to start coming up with some clever legal arguments relating to the First Amendment, something along the lines that these sites have become kind of a public commons area, and that since everybody uses them, or most people, a lot of people use them, and have reason to have access, that arbitrary restrictions on political viewpoints by the owners is kind of a violation of the First Amendment. It's sort of implied by the First Amendment somewhere, sort of like whatever in the Constitution implied Roe v. Wade. I think that sort of thinking ought to play into it. I also understand that to some degree, and I'm not a legal expert on this, but to some degree the way Section 230 has been used is sort of has a degree of interpretation on it in favor of the big tech companies anyhow, that isn't necessarily in the text and could be interpreted by a clever court in a different direction. So those are things I think that are out there that we should look forward to seeing, and we'll have to just kind of keep in the game here. One thing I would definitely recommend is don't get too pessimistic. I see on the social media, just from the conservative side, so much pessimism, and I think it's warranted, but at the same time, you don't win by being pessimistic. I mean, this is the time not to go fragment into third parties and silly vindictiveness, and focus on unity of the conservative movement. I'd even point out that these 5 Republicans that voted, against Trump in this impeachment thing, can turn out to be very useful to us in other areas. I mean, remember, Collins was a critical vote in getting people on the Supreme Court. And Trump's out of office, and he's not going to be convicted, so it really doesn't matter how she votes in terms of, in reality. People need to stop being so spun up over everything and think of this like it's like a chess game or something, And therefore, each one needs to be evaluated on their own merits. Collins, on the other hand, is the state where you're going to have a Democrat if you don't have a Collins. McCoskey's a little different. We should have a solid conservative there, and we don't. So that just gives you an idea of how you should look at these things. Well, I'm going to wrap this up now, and until next time, keep you informed.